Chapter 3. A momentary lapse of concentration. What can I say? One moment you're standing there with a hot cup of tea, the next moment you put it down without a coaster. It can happen to anybody, explained Ambassador Francis Sunderland. The veneer specialist, looking unimpressed and somewhat bewildered, struggled to overcome the language barrier and understand what was being said. In the best English he could muster, he muttered, "Okay, so I go to the van and bring my things." "Katrina, could you come here for a moment, please?" Francis called. Katrina, the nanny of Francis' 2 young boys, also made for an excellent translator. For this reason, she was often around, even when Francis and his wife Melissa weren't away. "Could you please inform the gentleman that this is a very special and custom-made desk, and I would be most disappointed if it will not return to its previous state?" "Yes, of course, sir," said Katrina, who proceeded to translate. "He says that he will make it as good as new, sir." This was good to hear, but even though this veneer specialist came very highly recommended, Francis would not leave him unsupervised with his dark brown oak desk and his office. Katrina turned on her heels and headed back to her duties, while Francis slowly circumnavigated his desk and sat in his chair. A slight look of puzzlement appeared on the face of the veneer specialist, as if to ask why he was sitting there and whether he would be sat there during the whole repair process. This time would give Francis ample opportunity to think about this evening's social gathering. The plans had already been made, and Melissa had hopefully placed all the orders for food, drink and service which would be required. The snow, which had fallen the night before, had all but melted by now. It was the early afternoon, and the daylight was already starting to fade. Ruffling his fingers through his prematurely grey but exquisitely groomed hair, Francis was growing more and more agitated by the length of time it was taking the specialist to finish applying the treatment to his desk. Looking inquisitively and tapping his watch, Francis suggested the question which he wished he could express verbally. 10 minutes, was the response, but at least it looked to be a good job. The guests would start arriving soon, and he had not had a chance to venture downstairs and supervise the preparations, but no doubt Melissa had everything in hand. "Finished!" exclaimed the veneer specialist, who looked particularly pleased with himself. "No touch for 8 or 12 hours, sir." "That's all right. Nobody will be in here this evening, and by morning it will be dry," retorted Francis, handing the fee to him in a small white envelope and gesturing towards the door. The job had taken longer than he had thought, although it had been done to a higher standard than he had expected. Only time would tell. It would take until morning for the veneer to dry completely, so the regular routine of turning and locking the door had an extra purpose this time. As the key turned in the lock and the satisfying click allowed him to retract it, Francis had high hopes for the evening. Slipping the key into his jacket pocket, he strolled down the stairs to join his wife. "It looks perfect," whispered Francis, as Melissa felt his breath upon the back of her neck. "You made me jump," she laughed, as she looked straight ahead at the caterers setting one of the tables in the hall. "How is your desk looking? I can't believe that you made such a fuss about getting someone in to do it today, of all days." "I know, I'm very sorry, but I couldn't bear to look at it like that any longer. Besides, I'm sure between you and Katrina, you've been able to coordinate things down here. There's still a bit of time until the first of them is due to arrive. I just hope that no one has spilt the beans, so to speak," he said with a wayward grimace on his face. "I was thinking about that, dear, and it occurred to me that if there are 20 or 30 cars parked outside, we may lose the element of surprise." "Don't worry. I've already spoken with Klaus from next door, and he is more than happy to accommodate all the parking for this evening." "So I suppose it will look like a party at the German ambassador's residence instead, will it? I hope that you invited Klaus, or it would be very rude to ask such a favour otherwise," she said sternly. "Of course I invited him, and all the guests know to park there, and then come here. Well, nearly all the guests. "You worry too much. Stop worrying. Pass me a glass of that white wine," he said, swooping down to give her a kiss on the cheek, while mischievously passing his hand around behind her to pick up one of the fine crystal glasses which sparkled invitingly. He took a small sip and savoured its rich flavour for a moment before allowing himself to swallow it. "It's a little on the dry side for me, but otherwise excellent. It's such a relief not having to order alcohol in from abroad here. This local produce is quite exquisite, and the food looks just as good. I'm going to check on the children upstairs. I think Katrina is there, but I just want to let them know what needs to be done before the guests start arriving," she said, smiling incandescently. "I think we have about half or quarter of an hour before the first of them get here, so can I trust you to hold the fort?" Darkness enveloped the residence of the British ambassador to Bulgaria, which stood bravely in the face of the stern Bulgarian winter. The cold daylight, which had melted last night's snowfall, was now replaced by a fresh blanket of cloud, heavily laden with the promise of fresh snow. The first flakes floated down, carried on a brisk and bitterly cold wind. Looking at his watch, Francis was shocked that it was still only 6:30 p.m, but the nights had been drawing in steadily. Looking up at the ceiling, he was very happy that he had won the battle to not have balloons or banners with "Happy Birthday" plastered on them. To him there was something unnervingly uncouth and brash about banners and balloons to celebrate any occasion, but this sentiment was one which was not shared by many. Perhaps this was an eccentric quirk of his, which was unfounded, but he had worked hard to get to his position, and no one could deny him a few eccentricities picked up along the way. Melissa slowly walked up behind Francis as he stood apparently daydreaming and flicked the back of his elbow playfully. "I told Katrina that she could head home for the day. The boys are fine, and I'm sure that they'll all behave themselves upstairs," Melissa whispered. "Okay, if you think so. I've just been looking at this fantastic selection of food. Am I allowed to have a nibble before the swarm arrive?" asked Francis optimistically. "You keep your hands to yourself, Mr. Ambassador. I'll be keeping my eye on you. We need you on your best behaviour," teased Melissa, turning and walking out of the hall. Finding himself unattended, Francis put both hands behind his back and strolled calmly over to the table, dripping in hors d'oeuvres and appetizers. With a strange sense of wrongdoing and guilt, he brought his hands together in front of his chest and took in the delightful sight with relish. Plucking up a blue cheese and pear tartlet with his left hand and a tuna niçoise crostini with his right, he quickly dispatched both in quick succession. Halfway through chewing the oversized mouthful, he stopped suddenly as he heard familiar footsteps approaching from behind. "I can't leave you alone for a single second, can I?" Melissa said in a cheery tone. Francis turned with his cheeks still full and offered a half smile, which was enough to send her spinning into a schoolgirl-like giggle. Francis found it difficult not to start laughing himself, but the thought of causing an appetizer-related incident on the floor meant that he was able to stop himself. Hi, my name's Antony Botting, and I'm the author of the Pebble in the Dark trilogy. If you'd like to hear more of this story, please subscribe to this channel and ring the bell below. See you next time.